A hidden tunnel, a giant widow. What he discovered under his barn will haunt you. Witness this unbelievable, true-inspired story right here on Whisper of the Past. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share where you're watching from. Let's get started. Ethan Miller had lived in Montana his entire life, surrounded by endless acres of wheat fields, rolling hills, and the shadow of the Rocky Mountains. The land had been in his family for 3 generations, and the old barn that stood in the center of the farm was more than just a storage place for tools and livestock. It was a symbol of his father's hard work, his grandfather's legacy, and the promise of continuity in a place that seemed untouched by time. But hidden beneath that weathered wooden structure was something Ethan could never have imagined, something that would change the course of his life forever. It all began one stormy night in early autumn. The rain hammered down against the tin roof of the barn, and the wind howled across the fields like a warning. Ethan had gone out late to check on his livestock, worried the storm might spook the younger calves. As he moved through the barn, lantern in hand, he noticed one of the calves had kicked loose a plank in the floor. At first, he thought nothing of it. Barns were old, boards rotted, and animals were strong enough to break them. But when he crouched down to fix it, he heard something strange. Instead of the dull thud of dirt beneath the floorboards, there was a hollow, echoing sound. He tapped the wood again with the handle of his hammer. The same hollow knock. His curiosity was instantly piqued. Ethan was not a man who scared easily. Life on the farm taught him resilience, and he had grown up hearing local legends about hidden bootlegger tunnels and outlaw hideouts scattered across Montana during the frontier days. Maybe, he thought, this was one of them. Maybe his family's land had more secrets than he realized. When the storm finally subsided, Ethan returned to the spot with his tools. He pried up the loosened boards, and to his astonishment, beneath the barn floor was a heavy iron hatch, rusted with age and sealed with bolts that hadn't been touched in decades. His heart pounded as he studied it. Why would there be a hidden door under his family's barn? And why had no one ever told him about it? His father had lived on this land all his life, as had his grandfather. Surely one of them must have known. The decision to open it wasn't easy, but Ethan was not the kind of man who could leave a mystery unsolved. He fetched a crowbar and worked the rusted bolts free, one by one, until the hatch groaned open with a screech that echoed through the barn. Beneath it lay a narrow passage, a tunnel carved deep into the earth, its walls supported by rotting wooden beams. A damp, musty air rose from below, carrying with it the scent of earth long undisturbed. Ethan's first instinct was to lower a rope and climb down, but a sense of unease made him pause. He went back to the house, grabbed his flashlight, a lantern, and his father's old hunting knife, then returned to the barn. With a deep breath, he descended into the tunnel. The passage was colder than he expected, the air heavy and damp, and the deeper he went, the more unnatural it began to feel. The walls weren't just dug by human hands. There were deep, jagged grooves along the dirt, marks that looked like claws. His flashlight beam flickered over the strange scratches, and for the first time, Ethan felt a chill crawl up his spine. Still, he pressed on. The tunnel wound downward, twisting deeper beneath the earth. The silence was deafening, broken only by the crunch of his boots on the dirt floor and the distant sound of dripping water. After what felt like half an hour, he emerged into a hollow chamber carved out of stone. And that's when he saw her. At first, he thought it was just a figure in the shadows, a trick of the light. But as he lifted his lantern higher, the figure began to move. She stepped forward, tall and gaunt, her limbs far too long to be natural. Her hair was tangled and matted, falling across a pale face that looked both human and inhuman all at once. Her eyes shimmered with a glassy reflection, catching the lantern's flame and glowing faintly in the dark. Ethan froze, unable to move, his breath caught in his throat. The stories came rushing back to him, the whispers told by old men in town, the folklore of a woman who had once lived in these hills more than a century ago. She was known as the Widow, a woman said to have lost her husband and children during the harsh winters of the 1800s. According to legend, grief had driven her into the wilderness, where she disappeared into the caves, never to be seen again. Some claimed she had starved, others that she had gone mad and lived off whatever she could catch in the night. But none of those stories ever mentioned her being alive. None of them explained how she could still be here. Her voice broke the silence, soft yet piercing, echoing unnaturally against the stone walls. "You came," she said. Ethan's grip tightened on the knife, but he couldn't bring himself to raise it. Her presence was terrifying yet strangely sorrowful, as though she had been waiting for him all along. "You look like him," she whispered, stepping closer. "Your father, he came here too." The words hit Ethan like a blow. His father? His father had never mentioned anything about this tunnel, or the woman who lurked beneath it. His father had been a practical man, one who believed in hard work, not ghost stories. But the way she said it with such certainty made Ethan's stomach churn. "Who are you?" he finally managed to ask, his voice hoarse. The widow tilted her head, her eyes never leaving his. "I was promised," she said. "Promised another." Ethan didn't understand, but a cold dread crept over him. He remembered the prosperity of the farm, how his father had always seemed to weather droughts and storms when others around them failed. He remembered how his father used to sit alone at night in the barn, silent, as though waiting for something. The realization clawed at him. Had his father made some kind of pact? Had the survival of their family farm come at a price? The widow reached out a hand, her fingers impossibly long, her nails sharp like talons. "Now it's your turn," she whispered. Ethan stumbled back, his flashlight flickering as panic surged through him. He turned and ran, the tunnel walls seeming to close in around him. The air grew heavier, pressing against his lungs, as though the earth itself didn't want to let him go. Her voice followed him, echoing in his head, promising that he would return, that he belonged to her now. When he finally scrambled back up the rope into the barn, dawn was breaking over the fields. He slammed the hatch shut, bolted it, and staggered out into the cold morning air, his chest heaving, his mind racing. But as he looked across the farmland, something felt different. The air seemed thicker, the colors of the dawn sharper, almost unnatural. When he caught his reflection in the barn window, his blood froze. His eyes glimmered faintly, the same glassy reflection he had seen in hers. Ethan realized in that moment that he hadn't escaped. He had been marked, and no matter how hard he tried to bury what he had seen, no matter how deep he locked away the tunnel, he knew the widow's claim on him had already begun. And this was only the beginning. The days after Ethan's discovery beneath the barn blurred together in a haze of unease and dread. On the surface, life appeared unchanged. The cattle still roamed the pastures, the wheat fields swayed under the September breeze, and neighbors passed by on the county road without suspicion. But for Ethan, every sound, every shadow, every quiet moment carried a weight that he couldn't shake. He hadn't told a soul what he had found. How could he? Who would believe him if he admitted that a monstrous widow with glassy eyes and elongated limbs lived in a tunnel beneath his barn? At night his sleep was shallow and restless. When he closed his eyes, he saw her face hovering just beyond the edge of his dreams, her voice whispering promises in the dark. He would jolt awake drenched in sweat, his heart hammering, and find himself staring toward the barn through his bedroom window, as though it were calling to him. More than once, he swore he saw a figure moving by the barn doors in the moonlight, though he never dared to go out and check. One evening, as the sun sank behind the mountains and bathed the fields in an eerie orange glow, Ethan found himself drawn to the barn without realizing it. His hands shook as he opened the doors, the smell of hay mixing with the faint dampness that seemed to seep upward from the hidden tunnel below. He stood above the hatch, his lantern casting shadows against the wooden beams, and felt the weight of her presence. He had bolted it shut, but somehow it felt like the lock was meaningless. She didn't need doors to reach him. She was already inside his head. The next morning, Ethan drove into town, hoping a change of scenery might shake off the gnawing sense of doom. At the local diner, the chatter of farmers and ranch hands filled the air, but Ethan couldn't focus on their words. His childhood friend, Mark Sanders, slid into the booth across from him, immediately sensing something was off. Mark had known Ethan since they were boys, had seen him weather his father's passing and the grind of running a farm alone. But he had never seen him this pale, this distracted. "You all right?" Mark asked, stirring his coffee. Ethan hesitated. He wanted to dismiss it, to brush off the question with some excuse about lack of sleep or the stress of harvest. But the truth clawed at his throat, demanding to be spoken. "Have you ever heard of the widow?" Ethan asked, his voice low. Mark raised his brows. "The old ghost story. My granddad used to talk about her when we were kids, trying to scare us into staying out of the hills. Said she lost her family in the winter storms and went mad." "Why?" Ethan swallowed hard. "What if she's real?" Mark laughed at first, shaking his head. But when Ethan didn't smile, when his eyes stayed fixed and unblinking, the laughter faded. "What are you saying?" Ethan leaned closer. "I saw her, Mark, under my barn. There's a tunnel, a chamber. She's there." The diner's noise seemed to fade around them. Mark stared at him, searching his face for a sign of a joke, a trick, but all he found was terror. "Ethan, you've been working too hard. Maybe you—" "I'm not crazy," Ethan cut in, his voice sharp. "I saw her. She talked to me. She knew my father." Mark's expression hardened. "Your dad's been gone for years. How could she—" "She said he came to her, that he promised something, and now she says it's my turn." Silence hung heavy between them. Finally, Mark shook his head. "Listen, man, I don't know what you think you saw, but you can't let it eat you alive. Stories like that, they'll get in your head if you let them." But Ethan knew it wasn't just in his head. That night, the whispers grew louder. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, when he heard the creak of the barn door. His blood ran cold. The cattle stirred restlessly, their hooves shuffling in the dirt. Then a voice floated across the fields, soft and echoing, carried on the wind. "Ethan!" He shot up, his heart pounding. The voice wasn't in his head anymore. It was outside. He grabbed his father's hunting rifle and stormed toward the barn, the moon casting long shadows across the yard. The doors creaked as he pushed them open, the lantern light flickering across the hay. The hatch lay in the center, the bolts still sealed, but the air was colder, thicker. "Ethan!" The voice came again, and this time the hatch rattled. The bolts clanged against the metal, though he hadn't touched them. His rifle trembled in his hands. He backed away, slammed the barn doors shut, and ran back to the house. But sleep never came again. In the days that followed, Ethan's reality began to unravel. Tools went missing and reappeared in strange places. Footprints appeared in the dirt near the barn, long and thin, nothing like human tracks. The cattle grew restless, refusing to graze near the barn. And Ethan started to see her even in daylight. Out of the corner of his eye, across the fields, in the reflection of the window, she was there, watching, waiting. Mark visited again, concerned by Ethan's declining state. "You look like hell," he said, pacing the kitchen. "You've lost weight. You're not sleeping. Maybe you need to get away for a while. Go visit your sister in Denver." "I can't leave," Ethan muttered. His voice was hollow, his eyes bloodshot. "Why not?" "She won't let me." Mark froze. "Who?" "The widow," Mark sighed, rubbing his face. "Ethan, this has gone too far. You need help, real help." Maybe the lights flickered. Both men turned toward the window. The barn stood in the distance, its silhouette dark against the evening sky. Then slowly the doors creaked open on their own. Mark's face drained of color. "What the hell?" The air grew heavy, pressing down on them. A whisper floated through the kitchen, clear as day. "Ethan!" Mark bolted for the door, dragging Ethan with him. But Ethan resisted, rooted in place. His body shook, his eyes glassy. "She's calling me," he whispered. Mark slapped him across the face, snapping him out of the trance. "We're leaving. Now." But Ethan never left. That night he returned to the barn alone. Mark had begged him to stay at his house, but Ethan knew it was pointless. The pull was too strong. He opened the hatch, the bolts sliding free as though they had never been locked. The tunnel yawned open, welcoming him back. He climbed down, lantern in hand, his heart pounding but his body moving of its own accord. She was waiting for him in the chamber, her glassy eyes reflecting the flame. "You came back," she said, her voice both triumphant and sorrowful. Ethan's hands shook as he held the lantern up. "What do you want from me?" Her long fingers reached out, tracing the air between them. "I want what was promised. Your father gave me his word. In exchange for the life of this land, he gave me you." The words tore through him. All the years of prosperity, all the times his father had seemed distant and heavy with some unspoken burden, it all made sense now. His father hadn't just been working late in the barn. He had been keeping a promise, preparing for the day his son would take his place. "I'm not him," Ethan said, his voice breaking. Her face softened, almost human for a moment. "No, you're mine." The lantern flickered, then went out, plunging the chamber into darkness. Ethan screamed, the sound echoing through the tunnel, but it was swallowed by the earth. By morning, the barn stood silent. The hatch was sealed once again, the bolts rusted as if untouched for decades. Mark returned later that day, searching for his friend, but Ethan was gone. His truck was still in the driveway, his tools in the shed, his bed unmade. It was as though he had vanished into thin air, but the neighbors began to whisper. At night, they swore they saw a tall figure moving near the barn, its shadow stretching unnaturally across the fields. Some claimed they heard Ethan's voice calling in the dark, echoing across the valley. Others said the widow had claimed him, binding his soul to the land, just as she had bound his father before him. The Miller farm was abandoned within the year. The fields withered, the cattle were sold, and the barn rotted under the weight of silence. But those who pass by on moonlit nights still tell the same story. If you listen closely, you can hear the whispers coming from beneath the earth, calling out to anyone who dares draw near. And if you're foolish enough to enter the barn and open the hatch, you may just find that the widow is still waiting, and she's never satisfied with just one soul.